Welcome back to DRS Dispatch, and this is This Week in Formula One. This week is the week of the 6th of April 2026. It is the first official week of April and the first week of the 4-week-long Formula One break. So there's not a lot to talk about this week, but there's a little bit to talk about. I'm going to be going over what the teams have been going through and some of the discussions behind specific teams. So we'll be going over all of that. So let's get right into it, shall we? So let's start off by talking about Red Bull Racing, where Hajar has admitted that the mood is not good somewhat after their difficult start to the season. Obviously, it's no secret that Red Bull Racing has had somewhat of a challenging start, to say the least, to the year, with their pace just generally being kind of nowhere right now, which is a shame for Red Bull, after obviously they achieved such massive success in the ground effect era. And yeah, I don't think that Red Bull will remain as kind of bad as they have been, but right now, as it says here, they find themselves in a midfield battle. And it seemed like Max was struggling even behind the Alpine, so not a great sign for the Red Bull, but certainly I don't think they're going to remain bad forever, though Max's liability to stay at the team is definitely questionable right now, I would say, for sure. But yeah, ultimately, as it says here, Hajar only finished P12 at Suzuka after a somewhat frustrating 53-lap race for him, which was kind of just a continuation of Red Bull's difficult start to the year. It says, obviously, Hajar out-qualified Max Verstappen, having started P8, which is certainly a rarity, though Max was struggling heavily throughout the day, so you know, it's much of a muchness there. Though obviously I think it's amazing that Hajar is up there with Max, if not better than Max on some weekends, because that Red Bull second position has definitely been questionable throughout the past couple of years. So I think it's really cool for Hajar, definitely. Yeah, ultimately, I think a lot of cars ended up being affected by the safety car around the middle of the lap, with Hajar being no surprise to that. And yeah, to quote him, he says, "It was just a really long race. I had a good start and was fighting Pierre, just like I wanted to on lap 1. He ran out of battery very early on the start-finish straight and started to be overtaken by everyone on every lap while trying to recover energy. I was just stuck for a while, so it was not very nice in the car." Certainly, it seems like that's a commonality in the Red Bull, with it just not really being able to recover energy very well, which is certainly problematic, because if you run out of energy, cars are just going to zoom straight by you, so you definitely don't want that to happen. But yeah, obviously I don't think Red Bull are going to remain as bad as they have been, as there's a lot of really good history there. And yeah, hopefully things start going better for Red Bull. Next story. Let's talk about Pierre Gasly, who had a really, really good Japanese Grand Prix. As he says here, that the Japan result that he had provides good motivation for Alpine after a long and intense race with Verstappen. Ultimately, Pierre was able to get out on top with Verstappen, but it pretty much was a battle that lasted the entire race. They didn't really cut to it very much in the feed or in the live broadcast, but it was a pretty intense battle, all things considered. Ultimately, though, he was able to finish P7, which is a really positive result for the Alpine. Certainly, it's not surprising considering Flavio Briatore's history with motorsport, though we don't really like Flavio very much here. He's very good at running a team, and it seems like things are looking up for Alpine right now. I would definitely say they're kind of top of the mid-pack, along with Haas maybe right now. Though obviously Haas had a little bit of a clanger of a race, but Ollie Behrman has been doing very well so far this season. Of course, excluding his crash at that, which wasn't his fault, not really. But yeah, overall, it was a really good result for the Alpine, and I think things are definitely looking up for them. It was a difficult race. Of course, it's always going to be difficult against Max, though that Red Bull has been definitely struggling with energy consumption as of late. But props to Gasly for managing to get a really good result, and hopefully this is the jolt of energy that Alpine needs after kind of struggling for pretty much the entirety of the ground effect era. And I'm curious to see how things will go for them, and how things will change. So yeah, next story. But let's talk about Laurent Mekies naming an important area for Red Bull to work on after a tough race. Obviously, from my perspective, it seems like the main one is the energy consumption, but I'll be curious to see what he has to say here. I mean, he's done the classic, so basically what he said is he's done the classic, there's lots to work on, but there's nothing that we can really pinpoint here. Obviously, there's problems with the power unit, and obviously it seems like energy consumption is somewhat of a problem there. So yeah, whilst he's done the generic kind of everything is a problem, there's too many things to change, I definitely think Red Bull has a lot to work on. So yeah, next story. So let's talk about Cadillac, and to quote Sergio Perez or somebody saying that a lot of progress has been made in a short space of time, and this was their strongest race so far. Obviously, we know Cadillac is going to be pretty much a backmarker for the most of the season. They're going to be playing catch up a lot, along with Aston and basically just Aston pretty much, because I mean it's their first season in the sport, though can't really say the same for Audi, as Audi has been doing extremely well, but Audi has they're going off the back of Kick Sauber being a thing, obviously, so it's not an entirely new project, whereas Cadillac is an entirely new project. So I think definitely they've shown a lot of promise at the start of the season. Definitely there's been a lot of positivity around the project. Whilst they haven't had amazing results, they still did pretty well in Melbourne. Getting one car over the line was more than other teams could say. And it seems like they're learning a lot and they're gaining a lot of experience. So yeah, no points yet, obviously, for Cadillac, but it says here that they've ticked off several milestones, which is exciting for them. And yeah, overall, it was somewhat of a good race for Cadillac. So yeah, hopefully they continue to improve. I have no doubt they will. And definitely there's a lot of promise around that project right now, I would have to say. So yeah, let's talk about Jack Doohan as he's revealed his racing plans for 2026, as he's secured a endurance deal as he's the Haas reserve driver. I think, obviously, I'm of the current belief that I think Ollie Behrman will most likely step up into that Haas seat in the next couple of years, with Ollie Behrman probably moving to the Ferrari, if I had to guess. So yeah, certainly cool that Doohan is picked up an endurance racing thing, and he's going to get some more racing in, which is exciting for him, as he's due to take on in Le Mans, which is extremely exciting for him as a fellow Australian. Obviously, I hope he's able to jump back into the sport, and I have no doubt that he will, but he will be representing Nielsen Racing in the number 24 LMP2 Oreca machine, joined by Briton Ed Pearson and Israeli Roy Nissani. Apologies if I mispronounced that. And yeah, obviously Le Mans is a massive racing event, and we've seen drivers like Fernando Alonso compete in it in the past, and a whole other dozen of Formula One drivers. So I'll be curious to see how Doohan does in endurance racing. Obviously, endurance racing is very different from Formula One racing, and obviously we've seen Max Verstappen jump into endurance racing and have massive success recently, barring his disqualification, of course. In the race before his disqualification, he ended up winning that race pretty much. So yeah, I'll be curious to see how Doohan does. And yeah, hopefully we see him back in a Formula One seat sooner rather than later. So let's talk about Ferrari and let's talk about Charles Leclerc. Obviously, going into it, I didn't think Ferrari was going to have their best race at Suzuka, just because from what we saw in testing, it seems like the strongest parts of that Ferrari just don't complement Suzuka as a track, which has always been very fast flowing and winding, which is just not something that the Ferrari seem to be particularly strong at. Obviously, it seemed like they were very strong in Bahrain, so it's a shame that we're missing that race for them. But there's other slow speed cornering races in the calendar that I don't doubt Ferrari will perform at. Though definitely, after McLaren finally managed to get a good race in, it seems like Piastri has an extreme amount of pace in that McLaren, and I think there'll be a lot of improvement in that McLaren as we go into the midway point of the season for sure. So I think the truth of the matter is that Ferrari needs to step it up in terms of their development if they want to continue this kind of uptrend of pace that they've had post 2025 season at the beginning of the 2026 season. And I think there's a lot for them to look at, definitely, in terms of hopping above the Mercedes and even maintaining the pace that they've had so far. Obviously, all 3 of the circuits we've had so far have been fast cornering circuits, so I'm very curious to see how they go once we head into a more slow corner circuit. I'm not sure if Mercedes is one of them, but yeah, overall, I think there's a lot to be seen for Ferrari and for Mercedes and for McLaren, certainly. And yeah, so Charles Leclerc has pointed out here that he feels their team's main weakness is the power unit, and they definitely need to focus on improving that, which I definitely agree with. Whilst the Ferraris have been able to get really good starts, it seems like the McLarens are kind of at a similar level of start aptitude. And yeah, I think improving the power unit is a thing that a lot of teams need to do, but certainly I think Ferrari is no exception. As just being good in the slow cornering circuits is not really going to be good enough to win a Constructors' Championship, let alone a Drivers' Championship. And yeah, I feel like they need to kind of head in the direction of Mercedes in terms of pace and all of that. So yeah, next story, let's talk about Lance Stroll making his GT racing debut in April alongside ex-F1 driver Paul Ricard. Obviously, Lance Stroll has been a driver that I think a lot of people have been very critical of, though he's no doubt a veteran of the Formula One sport, for better or worse. And yeah, he's making his debut in GT World Racing, which maybe suggests that he has ambitions outside of Formula One that he's aiming to pursue sooner rather than later. But I think it's not exactly uncommon for Formula One drivers to go and take a peek and compete in other races like Le Mans and in the Indianapolis 500. So certainly it doesn't really suggest anything other than that he has interest outside of Formula One, which I don't think is uncommon for a Formula One racer. And yeah, obviously this race is coming up now at the end of the week, so go check that out on GT World if you wanna go check it out. And yeah, I think it's cool. Good for Lance. Hopefully he goes well. Next story, let's talk about McLaren with Andrea Stella explaining where they need to improve after the Japanese Grand Prix. Obviously, they had a really good race with Piastri and a not so good race with Lando. It feels like Piastri, to me, has a lot better grasp of the rules and regulations than Lando does right now, which has just ultimately led to him being in a better position in terms of in terms of Suzuka, not in terms of the wider season, because obviously he hadn't yet completed a race until Suzuka. But I think definitely Piastri's in a better place than Lando right now, I would have to say. And yeah, similar to Ferrari, I think there's a lot for them to improve. I think Mercedes is probably the only team that can focus fully on developing and getting better, whilst a lot of the other teams are playing catch-up right now, definitely. So yeah, I'll be curious to see how they continue to go. And I think definitely Oscar looked very strong in Suzuka, so I'm curious to see how he goes, how he goes in future races, if he's able to start again, hopefully. Yeah, we'll see how the McLaren goes, I guess. Obviously, Piastri made this joke here, saying, turns out when we start these things, we're pretty good. And yeah, I think Piastri could have won the race had Ollie Behrman not crashed and the safety car came out, allowing Antonelli to jump him. I think Oscar probably would have came out on top of that race. So I think there's a lot of positivity for Oscar and a lot of positivity for McLaren. And as I've said, and as Lando has said, I believe that the McLaren will get better as the season progresses. We're only in round 3 of 22, going into round 4 now in a couple of weeks, or in a few weeks now. So yeah, let's talk about our last story. Obviously, let's talk about Oscar Piastri, who is confident that Mercedes are beatable in 2026 despite their dominant start, which I 100% agree with. I think there's certainly a lot of doom and gloom around, how good is the Merc? Is anybody going to be able to beat them? What's going on here? And I think the truth of the matter is that I don't think that the Merc is going to be unbeatably dominant. Certainly, I think Antonelli looked really strong over Suzuka, but I think Russell didn't look as strong in my opinion. So I think there's a lot to look at for both for the Merc, and I think there's a lot of improvement that teams like Ferrari, like McLaren can do to try to catch them, and that they are aiming to do. So I think there's a lot to look at for the teams, and I'm interested to see where we are in Miami after the massive 4-week break. But of course, for any new things that happen and any revelations we get from a rules perspective, I'll be covering them right here on This Week in Formula One. So that was This Week in Formula One. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If there's anything I missed, make sure to leave it in the comment section below and I'll cover it next week on This Week in Formula One. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, do all that. I would greatly appreciate it. And I hope you have a great, wonderful day. We'll be doing, again, I'll be watching the 1950 Swiss Grand Prix this week, so you don't have to. So stay tuned for that later in the week. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now. Peace.